We're the whites. Nobody ever cares if bad things happen to us anymore.
There's no fixing this. This can't be fixed. Right? This can't be fixed. You just have to escape. So that's what I did. I went to a neighborhood where, I have a very low black population.
And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
Somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it.
Jamline.
word, people? What is the word? How we doing out there tonight, y'all? Put a one in the chat if we doing good out there tonight, y'all. Hit that like button for me too while you're in here. Shout out to the Burger King. I don't think the Burger King knew in this moment of white male black fatigue that he would be immortalized in right wing memetics. I don't know that he envisioned himself in this moment forever. Like, if you could be immortalized forever by one moment in your life, like, this guy's probably got kids, he's probably married or been married. He might have wrote a book, he might have flew a plane, sailed a boat, like he might have done things in his life, you know, he has accomplishments, but you will forever be remembered by all of us warmly and affectionately as the Burger King. The Burger King. There is only one. We're going to talk about white men tonight. I know, right? So much. It's a slow news day. That's really what it is. It's a slow news day. There's actually absolutely nothing interesting happening anywhere in the world at all. It's really weird. Like, everybody in the world is being really, really chill right now. So there's like nothing much to talk about. So we're going to talk about white guys. And in particular, we're going to talk about, well, you read the title to tonight's show, Democrats, White Men, and Identity Politics. So we have to talk about the Democrats and their relationship to the white man's. I came across a couple of interesting conversations recently I wanted to review, because we talk a lot actually about the Democrats having a problem with male voters. And, you know, because I'm black, I talk about the black thing a lot more than maybe it's politically relevant. But even though Democrats talk about the black male voters leaving the Democrat Party as if it's the Titanic sinking, what they're really worried about isn't the 5 or even 10% of black male voters that might actually get peeled off the pack in the next election cycle. It's the white man. Yeah. Democrats are afraid of the white man. Who knew? And so the white man is kind of, you know, feeling the hate, Webster. Webster in the chat says, from the optics of it, it seems that the Democrats hate the white man. And I've been kind of noticing that myself lately. I've been thinking it odd. I've been thinking it odd how much the Democrats hate the white man. And I've been making this connection for a long time now, ever since I begun doing political commentary here. If the white man is the Democrats' number one enemy, and then black political logic dictates that, you guys remember the Root article years ago where they said straight black men are the white people of black people? Well, if the white man is the Democrats, if the straight white man is the Democrats' number one enemy, that probably means the straight black man is at least number two. I mean, I don't even think the straight Mexican man is the Democrats' enemy. They don't care what kind of Mexican you are. But if you're straight and white, if you're straight and black, Democrats seem to have a problem with you. And really, what's happening and what's going to happen, what's going to grow exponentially going forward is white men noticing just how unfair the Democrat scheme is for white men in particular.
Our way will bring to black residents in reclaiming ownership of our own communities. That is the spirit of Juneteenth, you all. It is about reflecting on our past. Other cultures are taught to never forget. We need to be reminded as blacks here in Chicago and America, remembering our past and working towards a more just future. Investing in black is not a criminal act. Sister Zakiya says she need a witness, so I'm gonna say it again.
So apparently Mayor Brandon Johnson from Chicago is investing in a kind of reparations program specifically for black Chicago businesses. And obviously the white guys aren't going to be happy about that kind of thing. And at the same time, you have you have Democrats digging their heels in against the white man. I talked about this before. The word for it is Kino. It's an actual term where it's basically footage, video edits, right? That's kind of the loose definition of Kino. And what's happening is what I've been calling right-wing Kino. Just the most inspirational Caucasian video memes ever are just coming out left and right every day now. And so the left really is up against, and for the first time maybe in generations, the left is up against an actual grassroots groundswell kind of a movement. No one is paying anyone to make this sort of thing. People do it strictly for the love of the white game. Like, these are literally the videos that pop up under a post that says, like, white people have no culture, or what is white culture, or something like that. If there's a viral post that says something like, white people don't have culture, you'll probably find a video like this underneath the post, right? Because this is kind of what's going on here. And what this represents is a type of energy. There is a palpable shift in the energy of America right now that I don't even know what to do with, right? But, I don't have to do anything with it. All I got to do is stay black and die. I'm not in charge of things. The Democrats, they're in charge of things, and they got to figure out what to do with this type of energy.
Got your back, my nigga. I know he wouldn't appreciate me saying that, but I don't care because it's one struggle. Whites, blacks against the Jews.
This is a type of energy that is the powers that be do not want this.
He might not like me saying he's my nigga, but we're all niggas, okay? I'm a nigga, you're a nigga. We're America's niggas. We're the world's niggas. We're the niggas of the world, Israel wants to kill us all. We're all niggas. We're all niggas here. It's okay. White, black, Cuban, or Asian.
I just realized this stream might get me completely demonetized. So throw $1 in the hat while the hat is still
white,
open.
Black,
damn it.
Red, brown, or yellow. We are all niggas. I don't care if you're a black nigga, white nigga. It is one struggle. If you're with God, if you're with America, I'm with you.
We are all niggas. And what the Democrats really can't contend with in the modern context of things going forward right now, and this may sound crazy, but think about it. Hear me out. You know how I am, crazy theory guy here. The white man will cast himself as the new niggas.
Give a nigga a break. Give a nigga a break. How much more can I take? Give a nigga a break. Give a nigga a break. Give a nigga a break. How much more can I take? Give a nigga a break.
Speaking of like journalists missing the mark a little bit, let's take a look at what Jake Tapper was saying here when discussing how Democrats have lost young men.
A left-leaning podcast that shall remain nameless, and we were talking about my kids because I think they were both people without kids, and they asked me about my son, and I said he was, he's a football player and he wants to be a policeman. And their joke was about my 15-year-old son. Oh, how does he feel about minorities? Like the idea that he wants to be a policeman.
He's not talking about Chapo. It's probably like Pod Save America or something. Jake Tapper would never go on Chapo.
Now, the thing about the Democrats, and you can kind of tell this if you watch like their online representatives and the activist crowd and the Democrat intellectual crowd, they cannot psychologically, intellectually approach this problem. Other than call white guys evil and racist, they have nothing to do moving forward with white men. They just don't know what to do with you. If you white guys would stop being racist and misogynist, evil people, then maybe the Democrats will figure out how to help you.
That's really funny.
He's racist, my son. And that was the big laugh.
Also, I hate that this guy is the like dog whisperer of young men, Scott Galloway or whatever, Scott Gallagher, and he has like weird takes on this stuff too. He's like,
Anarcho Banker, thank you with the $4 super chat. He says, are the Jays white or not? Much confusion. Much confusion. Some people would have you believe the Jays were the original niggas. I don't know anymore, Scott. I don't know. In some ways it matters not. In some ways, it matters greatly, but that is the $1 million question, isn't it?
Oh, my 15-year-old son, does he hate minorities? Like, first of all, they're making a joke. I don't know who the hell was interviewing him. 15-year-old son, plays football, wants to be a cop. We all know he's not going to be a cop, by the way. Jake Tapper is never going to let his son be a cop. Are you kidding me? Why in the ever-loving would he ever allow that? That's why you're Jake Tapper. Your son's going to be in media or immediately get like a cushy staffing job with like a high level DC person and go through that and then maybe become a senator one day. It's just not, it's never going to happen.
And there is this concept, the left believes in it like a religious pillar, but the idea of white privilege, right? The fact that you're born white, things will just somehow work out for you. If you just stay white long enough, just hang in there long enough, it'll happen.
I got dragged in the comments and all that stuff. And I thought to myself, this is why you are losing elections.
100%.
Like my football playing son who has no political views. He's 15. He thinks about World War II and gaming and playing linebacker. That's his world. You're deciding he's a racist.
I mean, honestly, your kid does sound kind of racist, though. I like him. He sounds like a good guy. American Man with the $5 super chat. He says, make straight black and white American men great again. U.S. Excuse me. Damn, smoke went down the wrong pipe.
Emotional damage. You want some therapy?
Thank you. Thank you to American Man with the $5 super chat. And then hold on, we had another one I just saw drop in there. Drew Beats. Shout out to my man Drew Beats with the $4.99 super chat. He says, I'll call this my demonetized super chat. You got a 50-50 chance. Good luck, bro. I know. I'm going to be a good boy for the rest of the night. That one clip could have cost me so much money, but it was so worth it. I mean, come on. We all niggas together now.
Because he wants to be a cop. And why does he want to be a cop?
Okay, first of all, that's a joke. Are there joy killers in the left and scolds on the left? Absolutely. People that absolutely love to behave as though being the biggest woke scold means you are the most morally consistent, best leftist. But like, that's a joke. First of all, every 15-year-old is already.
Hassan, if you didn't actually play the clip, because I actually watched that clip. I did a whole show around that particular interview with Galloway and Jake Tapper, who I think is fired now, isn't he? And I actually did find the original clip. And I'm not going to say that they weren't joking, because they were definitely laughing. They were definitely laughing, but they were roasting his son. And that is kind of the point. It's not, yeah, they were joking. No. They were roasting his son because he's a young teenage boy who plays football, thinks about war, and wants to be a cop. The most normal thing that boys have ever done.
Is already mainlining some of the worst reactionary propaganda on a daily basis. Let's be real. Ask your son what he thinks about women. If he says they're all hoes, then you know they are watching every bad manosphere podcast that's out there.
I just learned a new internet slang to help us defeat the algorithm. Because the manosphere, instead of saying the H word, they say 304. And then I was watching another video. It's funny as hell because it's like a Bigfoot AI video. They got AI Bigfoot. It's hilarious. And Bigfoot, he's like, so I'm out with the Huz. And I'm like, did he just say what I think he like? Oh, that's what they're calling it now, the Huz. Shout out to all the Huz out there. Big time with the $5 super chat. He says, Hood, did you see the organization handing out shields to protesters? They were free for BIPOC and $10 for the white people. Get out of here. You lying, bro. I mean, honestly, that's totally believable. But nah, I didn't see that. There was a guy I know, he was like handing out face masks or gas masks at the protest, some Mexican dude. Yeah, they kicked him over the fence now. He got arrested. He's definitely not coming back. The Midwest request with the $2 super chat. He says, femboys are haram, habibi. Well, that's why we're not Democrats, man.
Your son's going to be like, on God, them chopped Huz, they're destroying my life. If your 15-year-old son calls women females.
You heard him, the chopped Huz. That's the new word. We're going by Huz now. Look, it's in the Urban Dictionary. Huz is a new word now. It's in the Urban Dictionary. I was today years old when I learned of the Huz.
They're destroying my life. If your 15-year-old son calls women females, that's salvageable. If he calls them foids, make sure that there's no weapons in the house, okay? Because that's a mass shooter in the making. And if he says chopped Huz or like bops or whatever, then that's also somewhat salvageable. He'll grow out of it. Foids is probably the worst.
I don't say bop. I say pop. But I guess it's essentially the same thing. She a bop, she a pop. Either way.
Version of that. Femoids. That's an incel term. He's probably gone. What's really funny about this stuff, by the way, is that a lot of people on TikTok apparently have been yelling at me because I said, we got to figure out a way to like reach young men. They're angry and resentful. And a lot of people instantly went back to their stupid, like liberal instincts of being like, no, we should continue vilifying men across the board unconditionally.
Now, Hassan, it's weird if you know his character arc over the years. He was actually on an MTV show once upon a time called, I think he was on Man Code, wasn't he? I don't know. Maybe I overshot that one, but I know he's definitely done that kind of Man Code type of content for like major platforms, not just the YouTube thing.
Well, then good luck. You know what I mean? I'm not saying we should just like take the concerns that men have about like why women won't fuck them seriously and then lean into their entitlement. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm simply stating that like there are obvious issues here. There's obvious resentment here. And I don't think like automatic vilification is solving this, especially as a political party. Think about how much Chapo, for example, got fucking railed. Think about how much we got railed as Bernie bros. You know what I mean? Oh, it was so dangerous. It was so dangerous that Bernie Sanders has young men. And it's not even just young white men, by the way.
The Bernie bro thing should have been a wake-up call for the Democrats. It was obvious and almost public that you were cannibalizing your own male voter base at that point. A lot of Bernie bros are firmly in the Trump camp at this point. They look back at that Bernie bro association like a shameful part of their past.
Make no mistake, it's young men across the board. That's the other side of the story that a lot of people are failing to comprehend. Racial polarization between the two parties is going away as the W's that the Democratic Party could have presented during the civil rights struggle goes away. And as like the only people that remember that, the only black people that remember that are like 60 plus years old. More and more young black men and young black people, young brown people in general, do not look to the Democratic Party as like the automatic lesser evil any longer.
I was trying to fight that battle the other night when we were talking about the new racial reality and how black people, I played that conversation I was having over there on Mr. Z's channel, like me surrounded by a bunch of angry, confused nibbers. What you mean we not supposed to be fighting racism today? I'm like, yeah, we fought racism last week. We kind of did all right too. Racism don't even want to fight us no more. But these Mexicans, these Indians, these Africans, the Chinese, we got to talk about them. What you mean? I'm supposed to be fighting the racisms. Niggas, man, I tell you, it's frustrating, but it's a work in progress, man.
I'm telling you, man, this the reason why I be hating niggas, man. I'm telling you, man. It just be us. I be hating niggas, man.
Shout out to Rational B with the 5 ball. He says, no anti without semi for the algo. Yeah, shout out to you. Thank you so much for supporting the show, man. Hit that like button, guys. We are just getting into the conversation tonight.
It's that simple. And the Democrats have no solution for this. I don't know. I just like the Democrats are no longer the automatic, we are helping the working poor party. They have successfully shed that attitude. They've successfully shed that marketing. They really wanted to. They wanted to be the party for the super elite. And here's where we are. MAGA cosplays is the
too many white men are working poor. So to focus directly on the working poor would be to help white men by default. And ew, nobody wants to do that, right?
The working class. The Dems cosplay as anti-racist. This is a pretty reductive but decent way of looking at it.
Cop, he wants to be a cop because he wants to help people, you know, and he thinks that's the best way he can help people. And that's how the Democratic Party talks to men.
I know you say COVID broke a lot of people's brains, but I genuinely think that 2020 BLM broke a lot of young black men's brains in the worst direction. This is all because of this momentum. Joe Brandon coming in and saying he's going to do to alleviate police violence.
Now, look, this is Hassan's audience, right? And I'm larging mostly white, mostly liberal, probably relatively affluent. And this is how they conceptualize black men moving away from the Democrat Party. Our brains were broken by COVID.
Cosplay as anti-racist. This is a pretty reductive but decent way of looking at it.
Cop, he wants to be a cop because he wants to help people, you know, and he thinks that's the best way he can help people. And that's how the Democratic Party talks to men.
I know you say COVID broke a lot of people's brains, but I genuinely think that 2020 BLM broke a lot of young black men's brains in the worst direction. This is all because of this momentum. Joe Brandon coming in and saying he's going to do to alleviate police violence and structural inequalities, and he actively made those two things worse. I think that's the biggest factor of why young black men are shifting more Republican. No, I don't agree with that. But I do think that what the Democrats did, it's not just about young black men. It's just across the board. What the Democrats did is neuter an entire generation's political ambitions, because black men are the least consequential aspect of this equation. It's more so the Hispanic voting bloc. If we're
Painful to hear, maybe, but it's true. The black vote is no longer the most significant minority vote, and therefore the black male vote is going to be increasingly inconsequential. It was already less than consequential, and now it's just going to get worse.
We're looking at like some of the biggest gains, some of the biggest switches that has taken place. Part of the reason why I think is because like there's a lot of Latino people that are seeing themselves more and more within the white in group. I mean, one of the greatest examples of this is like this lady I saw the other day posting about how she got into an Uber and the Uber driver said no hablo inglés, and she was like, it's time to.
I don't, this is typical like liberal left wing. You can't understand your opponent without denigrating them in some way. And I would never really call it Latinos embracing some kind of white identity, because, it's always what people say. You just want to be white. But what I really think it is that Americanism, and especially if you're an immigrant, a non-white immigrant even, Americanism is a layer of two things. It is your ethnic identity and your American status, like your American citizenry. And so I think for a lot of people, especially like within the POC communities, there is an ethnic identity that is coupled, that is dovetailed nicely with an Americanness that internally there's no problem with, but externally people think it's weird.
To do mass deportations. And it's really strange because her last name is like Rodriguez or Menendez or something. Savannah Hernandez. That's her name. Her name is Savannah Hernandez. And she's like, we must deport all of these goddamn Mexicans. It's like, bro, who do you think is on the chopping block? So yeah, I don't know why people like this think that they're not on the chopping block inevitably, considering that the starting point of resentment is not a real crime prevention attitude. That's just a selling point. It's the same shit that like black conservatives tell themselves about the dichotomy between, some black people and other black people that are hood, Oh, it's not us that they hate. It's
again, even in Black America, he's talking about the same thing. There's a civil war in Black America, right? Do you have to be quote unquote black, or you can just be an American who's also black? You can be a Black American. You don't have to be quote, a nigga, so to speak. Yeah, I know, man. My channel is like probably the most heavily suppressed right now. I try to find my channel from like a clean account, account that's not under my actual, like my identities that I use or whatever. And yeah, you got to really search for me. You got to know how to find me.
It's the thugs that they hate. It's like, no, dude, they hate you too, dumbass. The Democrats used to at least rely on that like resentment that Republicans represent.
This is key right here. The Democrats relied on black resentment, which means as a matter of course, they have to stoke black resentment. Whether or not the situations on the ground are really true, whether or not we live in 1948 style racism is irrelevant. You must always keep people on the bridge at Selma. Never let them off that bridge.
Democrats used to at least rely on that like resentment that Republicans represent with regular frequency to drum up a base of support, to galvanize a base of support that came from these backgrounds, right? But now it's over. This past election, there was a decoupling of racial politics that I think the Democrats are not ready for. Okay, I'm stupid and was not really tapped into politics when this happened, but how did Democrats vilify and alienate men and not just alienate everybody. They did alienate everybody. Democrats want to present themselves as anti-racist.
Well, they alienated everybody with the trans issue. You know, the LGBT issue was it was edgy enough, but it was a kind of thing that cut really down family lines because everybody has a gay cousin, gay nephew, or whatever. You know, except the gay uncle. The gay uncle's always bad. Nobody likes that guy. But we always had like that and a willingness to accept. So when the whole gay issue first presented itself politically, a lot of people were willing to be charitable about it, right? But what happened is the issue progressed beyond something like acceptance and tolerance, and then it went to marriage, and now it's transgender story hour. And the Democrats are like, what's wrong with you? You must be a pig if you don't like this. There's something wrong with you. You're a bad Christian if you don't like this, right? The Democrats have offended everybody with that part of the thing. And that's not even touching on racial stuff. That even cuts across all the racial barriers.
And there's a couple different ways of doing that. If you are really an anti-racist, you want to solve some of the material inequalities that Black and brown people are facing in this country. But you don't want to really do that because that would require you to actually do anything in the legislative agenda. And obviously, that's going to be a big problem, right? So the way that Democrats have positioned themselves as anti-racist is basically by saying white men are the devil, just by presenting themselves as like anti-white men. White men.
The cat's out of the bag, though. And see, this is a problem. It's not that. Well, how do the Democrats act like they haven't been calling white men the devil for longer than my entire lifetime?
You teach me all my life that the white man is the devil? What the hell is that? Come on! You teach me my whole life that the white man is the devil. Now you tell me it's all right for him to come among us.
And now the white man is at a point where he just doesn't want to come among you.
There's no fixing this. This can't be fixed. Right? This can't be fixed. You just have to escape. So that's what I did. I went to a neighborhood where, I have a very low Black population.
So think about this for a minute. Connect these dots in your mind. A few weeks ago, the internet blew up with conversations about Black fatigue, right? If there is a palpable enough anti-Black antipathy in the country, and Black people are maybe the biggest solid Democrat bloc, that means your antipathy toward Black people is also an antipathy toward the Democrat Party, which politically empowers Black people. Yeah, I know. Something to think about, isn't it?
Because there are a lot of people in this country who do not like Black women, but Black women are the base of the Democratic Party.
Men are dangerous, white men are the devil. Now, it's not totally off base to say those things, okay? I'll say something like that. I'm a white man myself, but it's ultimately.
Hassan is not a white man. He is a brown foreigner from Turkey. He is a Turk. 400 years ago, Europeans would have burned you on a cross.
It's not how you craft a campaign. You feel me? You can't do that. You just can't do that. I don't remember the Democrats saying that. Oh my Lord. They didn't come out and say white men are the devil entirely. Okay. They didn't like verbatim say that. I'm obviously.
No, Hassan, they verbatim said that. It's a staple of certain parts of Democrat culture.
You teach me all my life that the white man is the devil? What the hell is that? Come on! You teach me my whole life that the white man is the devil. Now you tell me it's all right for him to come among us.
You'd be surprised what people say when you're not looking.
Exaggerating. Hello, I'm a Twitch streamer. Democrats believe the Republican framing DEI hurts white men, when in reality, more often than not, they just never message broad general policies that will connect the white men. Exactly. That's why universality is the best approach here. That's why I always advocate for universal policies. But when you bring that up, when you bring up universal policies, like one of the greatest examples during 2016 and in 2020 was the way that Democrats counter-messaged against Bernie Sanders. That's what I'm talking about. When they counter-messaged against Bernard Sanders, they did it on the virtue of Bernie bros. Bernie bros are dangerous. Bernie bros are bad. Bernie bros are misogynistic. Bernie bros are sexist. And that was effectively a way to weaponize identity politics in the silliest ways possible against the dude who was advocating for universal policies. Now, why is that significant? One of the things that really frustrated me, and there's videos of this back.
Well, speaking of a universal policy, this isn't a policy. Let me show you something. Bandit in the chat says, you hear the news about the Supreme Court upholding banning treatment to trans kids? Good first step. Yeah, that was in Tennessee, right? Last week, the Supreme Court said that reverse racism is a real thing, meaning you can legally sue for anti-white racism at this point. Up until just now, racism was largely a weapon wielded against the white majority of the country. And what the Supreme Court recently ruled is that now white people can grab Excalibur. For the first time in American history, white people can swing Excalibur. You can grab the sword of racism.
Back when I was covering during like the agitative propaganda, when I had the show called Agitprop on TYT, I talked about this extensively. One of the things I covered was Bernie Sanders' policies on universal alleviation of poverty. Bernie Sanders had a lot of universal policies that would overwhelmingly target Black and brown communities, right? But he never actually said he was overwhelmingly and directly targeting Black and brown communities. And the media would consistently turn around and say things like, well, where's your criminal justice reform? You're not talking about criminal justice reform. He was, right? Of course he was. But once again, the idea that liberals presented was the only way to cut policy for Black.
Snake, that would be funny as hell if Caitlin Clark sued the WNBA for anti-white discrimination. And then when you actually get into the court, they just play footage of all the Black girls in the WNBA giving her really, really hard personal fouls. Like, look, you see, obviously she hate me because I'm white. It would be funny to see how that plays out, though.
People is by talking about how you're going to get Black people out of prison, which is inherently a insanely racist approach to the subject. What do you think? Who do you think gets helped with policies that destroy poverty? Okay, policies that combat poverty. Who do you think gets helped more? Poor people. And Black people and brown people in general live in underserved communities are represented in a higher percentage in those groups.
See, the thing about that whole broad-based policy thing, you know, Obama had that rising tide lifts all boats problem. But the problem for Obama is Black people voted for Obama with the misguided, no less, conception that if I vote for the Black president, something good for Black people will happen next. Because Black people have this internal tribalism thing that white people don't really apply to politics. Like, there is no really group white politics. It's something that's nascent in development now. But Black folk are very tribal with politics. So we expect tribalism from our Black politicians, which is why I've been looking at Black politicians right now, all supporting the Latinos. Like, you niggas is all kicked out the whip. All of you are traitors. You're all race traitors as far as I'm concerned. And Barack Obama didn't do anything directly for Black people. And now with the Democrats and their problem with men, and with white men in particular, it's political suicide for any Democrat to offer anything specifically to white men. It's just impossible. It's never going to happen. But that's the thing that you need to actually address the problem. not only do you have to stop demonizing white men, you have to appeal to them directly. Look them in the eye and tell them that you miss them and you want them back.
Obviously, criminal justice reform plays a major role, and Bernie Sanders had that in his platform as well. But the notion that like the only way to talk about black people, the only way to do good policies against black people is either by targeting black small business owners in the way that Kamala Harris was trying to do, or rather by simply talking about like criminal justice reform is insane.
Clay Bisbee with the 5 ball says, white women in Seattle say it right in the face of white men that they are the devil, and they call white men that help them allies. This is crazy Seattle. Seattle is like one of the heart, it's one of the deep pockets of Democrat support. Like that's where the extremism come from. Like Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, like that whole West Coast is just cooked, bro.
That was very frustrating to me as someone who looked at the situation in South Carolina with Jim Clyburn, and how Jim Clyburn was like anti-Bernie. And a big part of the reason why Jim Clyburn was anti-Bernie was because he was backed by the same for-profit insurance companies that were giving him a ton of money. Yeah, here, let's do it again.
Senator Sanders, I do want to put the same question to you, Senator Sanders. What message do you think?
Answer that question, but I wanted to get back to the issue of climate change for a moment, because I do believe.
You remember that time where Bernie was on stage and he got punked by 2 black girls and they made him shut the whole thing down because the black girls took the mic? It's crazy.
This is the existential issue.
Senator, with all respect, this question is about race. Can you answer the question as it was asked?
I certainly can. Because people of color, in fact, are going to be the people suffering most if we do not deal with climate change.
And, going forward, the Democrats simply cannot keep doing this, because here's what, every time the Democrats make a racial argument, what they're low-key doing is making white people, white men in particular, but they're blaming white people, because racism without white people just doesn't exist, right? Brown on brown racism doesn't register in the Democrat world. This is why they can't really do anything about Latinos chasing black people out of Southern California. There's no political energy. There's no political will to approach that issue. But white people though, every time you talk about racism, you're talking about white people. And so what's going to happen going forward is the very idea of fighting racism is going to become offensive, because we're getting further and further away from anybody who ever did anything wrong to a black person who didn't have it coming.
That's it. Universal policies are incredibly important, because speaking about these policies from the perspective of universality is great, because one, you don't alienate any demographics by doing so, with the exception of the rich, I guess, and that's fine. But you also are addressing issues that impact these communities directly. Who do you think benefits more from Medicare for all? A rich white person or a poor black person? Over
a hospital. That is the correct answer to your question. That is who benefits the most. The hospitals, the people who own the hospitals. That's who benefits the most.
Overwhelmingly, these communities that are poorer on average will benefit more from universal programs. But it's very frustrating that Democrats are allergic to this kind of messaging. Even if it's performative, they're allergic to it. They love the performance of like attacking people. So do you attacking people that do take the universal approach? So do you understand what I mean when I say the Democrats did this to themselves for years and years and years? That's what I'm talking about when I said like the way that they presented themselves is like they tried to posture as though like universal policies are actually racist, or anything that helps like white men is actually racist. And it's really stupid, because
I wonder if this is kind of a low-key red pilling for even Hassan, because you can see it now. Well, maybe it wasn't about fighting racism per se. It was literally about crushing white people in general.
because the racial depolarization has already taken place, so it doesn't even fucking matter. Like here, Kamala doing pretty poorly among both black and Indian voters, and an underrated blow to the IDPOL theory of electoral politics, specifically the idea that Biden Hillary's weakness with non-whites compared to Obama was just about him being black and them being white. People also didn't vote Kamala simply because she's a black woman. Let's not forget that part. That's not as significant of a part of this puzzle as you think it is, I promise. Unless you personally think that Mexico is a pro-woman nation state, like more pro-woman and also pro-Jewish in comparison to the United States of America. Because Claudia Sheinbaum is a Jewish woman who is infinitely more popular than Donald Trump.
How was Sheinbaum became the president of Mexico? I do not want to speculate on a hot mic. I won't do it. You won't catch me slipping like that. Nah. I'm not even gonna do it, man. It's crazy how a Sheinbaum became president of Mexico, though.
And was infinitely more popular than Kamala Harris. Yeah, she had like, I think 85% approval rating. Like that's like we're talking George W. Bush after 9/11 numbers. Yeah.
We're talking black magic numbers. Like, how do you even make that happen?
Claudia Sheinbaum hits 85%, record 85% approval rating, as she assures Mexico is ready to face tariffs. Oh yeah, I saw this. I fucking love this guy's memes, dude. It's hilarious. Hey, can you guys just run on healthcare at the bare minimum? I think that would the DNC how to fold. Democrats spend millions to learn how to speak to American men and win back the working class. Nope, we're folding, boys.
Yeah, this is a great point, American Man. With the $2 super chat, he says, lib framing is always poor equals black. Racism much? Facts. Like, there's an assumption that black just means struggle. As far as Democrats and progressives are concerned, to mention black people is to mention people who desperately need my help. And I don't really like to be seen in that light. Even on my poorest day, when I don't have $1 in my pocket, I don't want anybody looking at me like I need help. I'm going to have money tomorrow. Payday is tomorrow. I'm just broke today. I'm going to be all right. Stop looking at me funny.
I hate this article, dude. I genuinely hate this attitude that the Dems have. They are allergic to understanding what the real issue is. Democrats spending millions to learn how to speak to American men and win back the working class. How do Dems win back young men? Like, no disrespect, but like, how is this helping? Making men feel welcome, meeting men where they're at, inclusive messaging, simple policy platform, messaging to men. Dems are wrong about men. It's so crazy that this is a major part of the story here. Anyway, days after Jake Tapper fumed over a joke made about his teenage son wanting to be a police officer in an appearance on a left-leaning podcast claiming it was the reason why Democrats are losing elections, the host of How Long Gone responded to the CNN anchor. Him willfully choosing to take a joke wrong that he definitely knew what it was in the moment, I would say is...
No, now he took the joke wrong. Look, I played the video for you guys, man. They were roasting his boy. Like, I was offended for his son. Like, that's crazy how your pops doesn't defend you in public when people are roasting his kid because he want to be a cop. Like, if my son want to be police, I don't care. I got friends that have been selling crack their whole lives. You better not laugh at my son because he want to be police. I'll make that nigga lock you up.
Only a pro move, co-host Chris Black drawly noted. At one point, Tapper brought up an appearance he made on the left-leaning podcast that shall remain nameless in order to argue that liberals in the Democratic Party are losing political ground among young men. Specifically, he referenced an exchange he had with the host about his 15-year-old son's admiration for law enforcement. Their joke was about my 15-year-old son. Oh, how does he feel about minorities? Like the idea that he wants to be a policeman, therefore racist. That was a big laugh, the CNN star grumbled. And then I got dragged in the comments and all that stuff. And I thought to myself, this is why you are losing elections. Someone actually sent me the link to the podcast, by the way. I think it was like 1,000 views and like 30 comments total. Does anyone have that link? Oh, here it is. Here's the clip. 1,000 views and 9 comments. How Long Gone, 1,000 views.
Or youngish man, younger than me, man, is... especially Gen Z, like
where did you see the comments? Where are the comments that showed discontent? This has 10 comments total.
Oh, you're not even playing the clip? That's weak.
And 2 of them are from the last 4 to 8 hours when Jake Tapper actually criticized the podcast. There's one that says 4210 for those wondering. You read my mind. Thank you so much. Thanks. Bro, there is no way. This is 1,000 views, man. 1,000 views. He just presented this as though this is like a major point of discontent when it's like dudes who are just joking. Okay.
Again, you can keep trying to ignore the problem all you want, but it's definitely there. I want to jump to another conversation before it gets too late. There's something else I was watching right before we went live tonight. I said, you know what? Let's talk this one out here.
With Jackson, and where there's a lot of overlap, is that I think Democrats could make huge gains by simply ceasing to stigmatize men in general, and specifically straight white men as a category, and return to a kind of neutrality, which is again in line with my idea that universal values and principles actually benefit everybody the most. I think that they've erred too far in the direction of stigmatizing and making men feel that they don't matter in this coalition.
You know, I think it's really it's the irony of all ironies that Democrats are now considering white men. Like they are attempting to approach white men as a voter base. They're trying to figure out how to do that. And right now, the Democrats are so far gone that their party is literally full of women and brown people. And it's almost like you're just psychologically maybe incapable of bridging the gap at this point.
In fact, everybody is entitled to self-esteem and a sense of worthiness, except for this one group who happen to be numerically
and
quite
Thomas, you're saying that
significant.
that is because of identity politics as it's been practiced?
Exactly. That's an outgrowth of identity politics.
Can I respond? Thank you, Thomas. I know I appreciate that there's more points of overlap here than there is,
Absolutely.
100% divergence. Okay, but I would say one of the challenges the Democratic Party has had since the early 1970s, and it continues to this day, is trying to, on the one hand, represent the interest of the ascendant classes, if you will, of women in a feminist era, of LGBTQ folks, of people of color, and at the same time.
Now, again, notice the language people use on the left. When he says the ascendant classes, right, they are all ascending against white people or white men in particular. Like, it's a very particular structural problem that you really can't escape in Democrat framework. So they're either oppressed by the white man, underserved. You remember they talking about underserved communities in the last clip, underserved by the white man. And now it's ascending against the white man. Like, despite all of his oppression and his underserving, we are rising up, Still again shall I rise, right? What was that stupid ass Maya Angelou quote?
Time hold on to the white, if you will, the white working class, which is one of the constitutive parts of the New Deal coalition, and trying to sort of do both at the same time has been the biggest uphill challenge, I think, for the Democratic Party, and they failed at it pretty badly. And I think the reason why the politics of the country have moved to the right over the last several decades, and the Overton window has definitely moved to the right, is because the Democrats lose the white male vote so badly in election after election. And if we don't figure out a better way to tell this story about that you can do both at the same time, in other words, you can lift up everybody at the same time, but we have to be specific about including men and white men in.
How can you lift up everybody at the same time if your whole reason for wanting to lift up everybody is that white men have been keeping everybody down? You don't realize there's a hypocrisy baked into your position at that point? Like, if you're going to say that the white man is the devil and we got to help everybody else, all right, that's at least logically consistent. Whether or not if it's, factually true is irrelevant. Facts don't matter. But if you're going to say that we're here to help everybody, but the white man is the devil, so, we got to fix the problems that the white man did, then you're not really here to help everybody. And so this is just a reality. It's a hypocrisy that's being revealed. And it doesn't even matter how you talk about it at this point. You're going to do what you're going to do because your politics dictate that. Your ideology dictates your behavior.
In that lifting up piece, not just the groups that have historically been marginalized. If we don't do that, then we get what we get.
How explicitly, Jackson, are you suggesting that the party appeal to white men? I mean, they name women, they name blacks, they name Latinos. Do they want to be saying we're here for white men also?
Well,
That's a tricky question.
And yeah, GQ says the white isn't the only target. It's always the black man's fault being part of the boogeyman. And this is a point I was making in the build up to this whole show, that remember the whole straight white men are the black men. I mean, sorry, straight black men are the white men of the black community, right? That was a whole article that went viral a couple years ago. And I made this point: if the straight white man is enemy number one, well, if you get rid of the straight white man, I'm the next guy up. So I'm already getting ready for the fight. Like, before you even get rid of the straight white man, I got to get ready for war, because obviously I'm coming next, right? And then, you know, when you look at the black community, it actually did play out this way, right? So we had this rainbow coalition. This is literally what I was trying to explain to these niggas on the other panel the other day. Like, you have this rainbow coalition. So the theory is black people are incredibly outnumbered in America. Like, the racial demographics before 1965 are like 90% white across the board in, you know, most places, right? And then it starts to diminish below that. And we invite, as black people, as part of our political social strategy, we welcome other non-white groups into the country, assuming that they would share our interest. And what we're finding out now at this point is that not only do they not quite share our interests beyond wanting to live in America, but they hate us before they hate the white man. And that's a bitter pill to swallow. You know, I played that clip. Let me see if I can dig that thing up real quick for you, because it was actually hilarious, and I couldn't believe, when you think about the whole hilarity of the concept, it's like, yeah, you really should have seen this coming. Actually, if you guys weren't so like progressive, stupid brained, this would be an obvious thing to see coming. But because liberalism is effectively dishonest about the nature of man and human interactions, that you have to lie to yourself about the nature of other non-white people, right? Like, we're not all happy kumbaya together. And in fact, this is a point of discomfort for a lot of people, but the introduction of the white man actually slows the bitter, bloodthirsty rivalry between the different black groups, because the white man don't like to see that kind of stuff when he trying to make money.
I don't think y'all are grasping what I'm saying. Like, imagine time travel is real. Okay, you're enslaved, you're in the South. Harriet, she comes, she gets you. You flee to the North, you see the time machine, you get in it. You fast forward to 2023, and as you're in the time machine, it's like a slideshow documentary of all the progression, all the accomplishments that have been made for and within the Black community. You begin to cry because you never thought that you would be able to see any of those things. You get out the time machine, you're looking around, taking it all in, and then suddenly you hear the N-word and you jump out of natural reaction. You turn to see who said it, and it's a Mexican. A Mexican. I don't think y'all are grasping what I...
A Mexican.
I also am extremely, I want to raise an extremely cautionary flag that Thomas has already raised, that white male identity politics can be played by the right in ways that are completely racist and pernicious and negative. So I don't think we have to fully embrace some identitarian politics on the left. That's not what I would say. I would say that creating inclusive narratives and stories and going into those spaces and talking to these men and having, that's why I think that's really great when you have progressives and liberals and Democratic Party people going on Fox, going into red states. I work in red states all over the country.
You know, Ian, I was making this point maybe years ago when I first really logically walked myself through this argument, but ironically enough, when you look at the overwhelming problem that the immigration issue is for Black people in particular, we would have been better off just working it out with the white man. If we would have just been working it out with the white man, our population numbers would be greater. Our population density would be greater. We would literally just have regions, you know what I mean? And we wouldn't have this hostile encroachment from other ethnic groups, right? We would all be happy black and brown. I mean, happy black and white racists together. It's literally the Kyrie Irving, Nick Fuentes clip I played earlier. Like, we could have all been American niggas and just been kicking everybody else out. But no, you niggas wanted to be butthurt.
I'm constantly giving talks and trainings in very conservative areas. I work with the military. I work in the sports culture. In other words, I'm not in some cloistered, liberal bubble. I'm out in the world all the time working with people across these boundaries. And I think that people can be responsive. But I think showing up is a critical piece of the package here. And by the way, to Thomas's point, you've mentioned it a couple times. The cosplaying of I have a Glock, and if you come into my house, you're going to get shot. I think when Democrats start engaging in this kind of sort of almost like petty, theatrics, it almost always backfires because it's so transparent. So I think it has to be much more organic, and that's why Bernie Sanders, to use an example that you already referenced, the Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump voters, those of us who are concerned with policy think, what are you kidding? If you supported Bernie Sanders, how can you then support?
I just thought about something. It is a weird problem that the Democrats have from a psychological perspective. Like when they approach men and masculinity, think about this, right? Democrats, on the one hand, they want to kill the president, right? How many times have you heard them make allusions to the death of the president? Or even better, right? Punch a Nazi. That is an actual phrase. That is an action item on the list of to-do things, on the to-do list of a lot of Democrat, behaviors and agendas or whatever. Like, that's literally how they think and what they believe. Yet they think they are uncomfortable with something like the MMA. They are uncomfortable with two guys going outside and having a street fight. The Democrats have really, really broken any connection with base understandings of what it is to just be a man, to live in the world of men, just to be a regular guy who has to get along in the world of regular guys, right? They have no understanding of what these things mean. And so, like, when we talk about how to approach men, they really are like out to sea. They are just lost.
Donald Trump, because it wasn't about policy. It was because they responded to Bernie Sanders' energy and anger and authenticity, not to his policy positions, which align much more closely with the Democrats than anything you could imagine that Donald Trump would represent.
Thomas, Jackson has made it clear that he's not arguing for a labeling of men as victims. He's not proposing a kind of a victimization package, but he did say that he feels that men are experiencing, your phrase in your opening was a threat to their centrality in the culture, by which I think you mean, Jackson, that over time, men had the best paying jobs. Men were, the leaders in academic life, places where they no longer have those because of changes in society. And that's a reality that needs to be, I think you're saying, spoken to and addressed.
As Democrats, you've taken on the really stupid position of taking things away from people and then attempting to convince them that they should be happy for their own downgrade. Like, has anybody ever been demoted and then been happy about it? Like, why should people be happy about losing their position? Like, if you listen to Democrats talk, they'll say it flat out, like, America is going to become a majority minority country in years such and such and such, and this is a good thing. Like, why would you think that's a good thing if you're the group of people that they're targeting? If you're the people that they say they want less of, why does it make you happy to have less of me? And see, until the Democrats can grapple with that simple kind of existential reality, how do you even approach talking to somebody like white men? Like, you got a lot of soul searching to do, bro.
Dressed. And I want to take that to you, Thomas. What do you think about addressing that issue head on as a part of the message that would come from the Democratic Party and from the left?
Jackson has made several points, or several times he's stated the importance and necessity of framing narratives, which I certainly agree with. And I think that Democrats really need to understand how to create a narrative that's inspiring and persuasive to men across ethnicities, because we've seen Black men and Latino men, especially working class, have some of the same kind of proclivities as white men do. They need to craft a narrative that shows that, in fact, human flourishing.
We heard him say Black men, white men, Latino men, we apparently have the same proclivities. Probably because we're straight too. That's generally the tie that binds us all together. All men, if we're straight, you think similar things. Even if we're enemies, even if we're bitter, bloody rivals, deep down, we're kind of alike in a lot of the basic ways. I just hate you, though. I really, really hate your guts.
And I think that Democrats really need to understand how to create a narrative that's inspiring and persuasive to men across ethnicities, because we've seen Black men and Latino men, especially working class, have some of the same kind of proclivities as white men do. They need to craft a narrative that shows that, in fact, human flourishing is not a zero-sum game. It is not a limited pie that when women get a larger slice, you necessarily.
Again, Democrats' problem with men is directly connected to the problem with women. The same way you can't uplift all the other racial minorities if your reason for uplifting them is that the white man kept them down. You cannot uplift women if your reason for uplifting them is the white man kept them down, without making enemies of the white man. Either way, you're making an enemy of somebody with your whole scenario, with your narrative. Your reason for being is the white man is evil, and you kind of have to address that.
Give up your slice. I think we need to show how everybody can flourish together by creating, a culture of opportunity. And that's why I think once and for all, we need to abandon this kind of pandering. My friend Mark Lilla brilliantly wrote after Hillary Clinton got defeated in 2016 an op-ed in the New York Times that went viral. And one of the key points in there was that he said, I just looked at the DNC website, and they had 17 different platforms depending on your identity group. If you were a Latina, you click here. If you're LGBTQ, click here to see our platform. The RNC had one platform. It was what they were going to do. It might have been something you completely disagree with, but they were clear that this is what we intend to do, regardless of what your identity group, your abstract identity group is. And I think Democrats need to get back to that. The enthusiasm that Obama carried in 2008 has never been captured in the kind of post-Obama Democrat leaning into identitarianism politics that we've been subjected to ever since.
So Jackson, Thomas is suggesting that the Democrats should not only not single out men, but they should just stop singling out people grouped by essential characteristics. What's your take on that?
Again, I think that's more aspirational and almost utopian than in very practical terms. There are interests that people have based on their social position, their subject position, whether women, like are we going to pretend, for example, that abortion rights are not women's rights? Like that there's somehow...
May I interject?
Here's another killer for the Democrats when it comes to the abortion issue, right? Well, reproductive rights, right? I've been thinking about a particular type of attack for the Democrats, against the Democrats, right? Why don't men deserve reproductive rights? Hear me out. From an argumentative standpoint, right? Just because a woman actually physically carries the baby, does that deny the man of any reproductive rights? Is that your position as a Democrat, that because women carry the baby, that men actually don't deserve reproductive rights? I think this is a weakness for the Democrats if somebody actually wanted to push that button. If you actually pressed on that issue, they would blink, they would squirm. Because I wonder what the Democrat answer to that would be. And then how do you look me in my face as a man, as an individual, and tell me that I simply do not deserve a particular right?
Jack, that doesn't work. Appealing to women around the issue of abortion actually backfired, and Kamala Harris lost ground with women. Trump gained ground on 2020 with women when that was front and center on the agenda.
Fine. I mean, that's a practical political reality that we're trying to figure out. Like, in other words, how did abortion? How did they miscalculate how important abortion would be for millions and millions of women voters who Trump figured out a sort of sweet sauce where he could figure out a way to narrate his own position in a way that they can justify being pro-choice and voting for Donald Trump. I mean, it's complicated when you get into the weeds, but I'm just saying there's no doubt that there are specific interests that people have based on their social position that I don't want to negate. Like, I work on men's violence against women, for example. Are we going to say all people need to engage with the subject of sexual assault and domestic violence and everybody got to work together? Or are we going to say we need more men to start speaking out about men's violence against women, because women have been carrying the burden on that subject forever, and there have been very few men who've had the courage and the strength to stand with those women? Not just people standing together, but men standing up and saying, I'm against.
You hear, and this guy here, allegedly, his whole reason for being in this discussion is to approach how the Democrats can appeal to men. And he can't even stop himself from saying, you men are just beating up women all the time. It's terrible. Like, this is a problem. I pointed this out when I was on, I think I was on Freezy's panel. It was on Father's Day. I played that clip for y'all too. Like, you realize it's Father's Day and y'all kind of low-key shitting on men. It's crazy how everybody's so comfortable doing that. Even as you claim to want to appeal to men, you go out of your way to talk bad about men.
Against that abusive behavior, and I'm going to challenge other men who are engaging in it. By the way, similar.
And so you're saying they're speaking as men, not
yes,
just...
as men, not as people. And I would say that it's important for people who are in groups that have relative historic advantage. Again, we can pose a universalist ideal, but there are people who have disproportionate advantage. And
if the right wing, if any Republican, like electoral challenger were to challenge that notion, they would actually win in a debate, because the Democrats can argue it from some kind of emotionally distracting point, but as a matter of policy, as a matter of practice, you cannot argue that white men have any legal or structural advantage at this point, where the majority of the government, we know we're operating under diversity principles. Even before DEI was a thing, like, there was a push, there was an agenda to add more non-white people to the workforce and to the government roles and to leadership positions. And so once that thing becomes policy, once that becomes a goal, you cannot also say that, you can't say at the same time, the government is going out of its way to help women and minorities and men have all the opportunity. You can't really name any way in particular that government helps men specifically. And a Rational B, shout out with the membership, Rational B, he says, they're scared we'll realize men and women aren't equal, and all straight men have more in common with each other than their own mothers. And that is a real truth. You know, I was just thinking about Brief Faults to Mothers. I might have to dig that book up and read it a little bit to you guys, man. We used to study stuff like that, the mothers and how that affects the society.
And, you know, white men are historically advantaged in the West. I mean, again, there are subsets of white men. There are gay men, there are straight men, there are, you know, what do you call it?
There are poor men.
There are poor men, there are rich men. So it's impossible to posit one, you know, homogenous group of even white men. I appreciate that. That's why we have to get a little more specific. Maybe the Republicans don't have to for their own purposes. We do.
one thing we haven't gotten to, and it's a complicated topic, is concept of masculinity, and it's people define it different ways, people aspire to it in different ways. But Thomas, how does the notion of masculinity, in your view, fit into this conversation about what the politics around men in politics should be?
That's a great question, and in fact, I actually want to respond maybe with an answer that remains interrogative. What are men's interests? What are masculine values? American society is so dynamic and complicated a quarter of the way into the 21st century. I don't know that we can define those in a way that works with a population that's 335 million. I mean, educated men who have,
I think he's stumbling onto something really, really important. You see how Trump kind of created MAGA, Make America Great Again? And even within that, there's another phrase that, America First, that whole crowd. And there's a conceptual reality on the right. There is even if it's argued over, even if it's still kind of growing and solidifying its being, there's an identity on the right. There is a static, consistent identity on the right. You know who and what you are. On the left, though, they don't know what it means to actually be American. They do not have a consistent definitional understanding of what it means to be an American. And so this is why they literally try to say that anybody who just got here yesterday, he's an American now. He's just as American as you and me. It doesn't matter if he doesn't speak English. It doesn't matter if he's got 8 wives. It doesn't matter if he's an honor killer and his daughter is buried in the backyard because she talked to a black guy one time. He's just as American as you and me. The left really doesn't have a conception of what it means to be an American. And for right or wrong, if you're on the right, it's because you understand who and what you are.
Are men's interests? What are masculine values? American society is so dynamic and complicated a quarter of the way into the 21st century. I don't know that we can define those in a way that works with a population that's 335 million. I mean, educated men who have, jobs in the symbolic economy, as Musa Al-Gharbi would dub it, or as a sociologist would dub it, are so divergent from what is kind of the caricature of masculine values at the GOP, the RNC convention with Hulk Hogan tearing his shirt. I don't know how we put those people all together under one label.
See, everyone on the right, male and female, can in some way identify with Hulk Hogan ripping his shirt off. It is an American touchstone. Because, all right, look, put a 1 in the chat if you grew up and you remember seeing Hulk Hogan rip his shirt off at some WWE event as a kid growing up in pre-diversity America. Because you understand, Hulk Hogan ripping his shirt off is a part of pre-diversity America, right? When it was just us and them. Meaning like when it was mostly white people and the black minority population, right? I was explaining to a lot of people the other day on the Mr. Z panel how for most of American history, it was really us and them. It was a majority white country with a minority black population. And the 80s was pretty much the end of that era. But, in the late 80s, early 90s, if you were, alive, you saw Hulk Hogan ripping his t-shirt off. And so when they bring that thing up at the MAGA rallies, it is reminding us of who we are. And this is what I mean about the Republicans, whether you like it or not, they have a conception of who we are, and it's attractive to people.
Do you know what I mean? And women, in the workplace who are pulling down really incredible salaries and large numbers, what is within, what is the women's interest here? What is the black interest? I guess I come at this. Jackson is an expert on masculinity, but I come at this, with a deep skepticism that we can ever articulate what any group's values or interests are. When you say that we should defund the police, or look into limiting police interactions, because that's in the interest of Black people. You get tons of Black people in poor communities screaming, saying, stop doing this, I'm the one living with the violence, put the police back. So which is it? Is it soft or hard on crime that helps Black people and is in the interest of that community?
So back to you, Jackson, on the masculinity question. I mean, what should the party be thinking about when it's representing the interests of men? Is it also working at defining what it means by masculinity and what it means to be a man?
Well, again, I think I appreciate the question and the opportunity to say that even the term masculinity is limiting. I would use a more sociological term, which is masculinities.
See, this is him, Mr. Katz, with a Z, K-A-T-Z. His name is Katz, And Mr. Katz here is attempting to broaden the definition of masculinity. And I think, it's not a good thing. I suspect he wants it to mean other things that doesn't really work with traditional concepts of masculinity.
EIES, which suggests that masculinity is not a singular construct, but there's a range of different masculinities that are vying with each other, and then and also then competing with each other, but also then in a patriarchal culture, those masculinities are generally speaking in a positive position or a powerful position vis-a-vis women. Okay, so that's important to acknowledge. So I think there's a broader conversation about masculinity. I don't know if there's such a thing that I would argue, Thomas, that we need to instill, sort of masculine values. I wouldn't put it that way. I would say that American culture is very much a tension. This is a broad way of thinking about American culture, is a broad tension between rugged individualist ideas, which is very masculine, the idea that you can make it on your own, independent. A real man is somebody who's independent, not interdependent, but independent, and can kind of do it on his own, like the Marlboro Man, right? Out in nature, and no one else is really got to be part of the package. It's not relational. It's very much individualistic. Versus community, the connection and community and the sense of being connected and interdependent, which is in a binary terms is coded as very feminine. And so I think one of the tensions in American life is between the individual versus the community, which is in binary gender terms is masculine and feminine. And I do think there's an awful lot of men who are very caring and very relational.
I'm going to let him say that in a second, but it sounds like he's talking about the Longhouse. When he talks about, rugged individualism versus the community is where the groups of women have more power. A group of women have no power in raw nature, where the man is, master of all that he sees. And there is this constant push-pull, or, there used to be at least this push-pull between those two poles, right? But America is fully developed. There's no frontier. There's no war left, really. Not really, but, there's just no great adventure within the context of the American development that can really define your manhood anymore, not like it used to be. And so these ideas of what we are as animals and as male and female, they're starting to fall apart in the modern world. And it's having a political effect now.
Between the individual versus the community, which is in binary gender terms is masculine and feminine. And I do think there's an awful lot of men who are very caring and very relational and want to be involved in the lives of their children, for example, in ways that historically previous generations of men weren't. There's all these positive changes. By the way, feminism is what has propelled those changes in men's lives and getting men more in touch with their relational selves. And
you see what I mean? Now he wants to define masculinities as the feminist men who are emotional and they cry when their wife pegs them because it's so releasing. And, those are the men that he wants to squeeze into the masculine definition. And I think the right-wing concept of masculinity, a rigid, stoic masculinity, a patriotic masculinity, a Christian morality masculinity, the left is really rigidly opposed to that. And they can try to lie about it and make appeals, but at its core, they hate that.
And emotional and relational lives with their children and with others. So I mean, there's a broader conversation that many of us have been having over the years about how to transform this notion of, quote, masculinity in ways that are more life affirming for men and not just caricatured.
One thing we saw that the Republicans do was play to us, as Thomas suggested, play to a certain notion of masculinity. And there's this whole culture now.
Wait, Red, you look this guy up real quick. So he's the first man to minor in women's studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and he holds a master's degree from Harvard Graduate School of Education. Yeah, so he minored in women's studies.
Of podcasts that young men are listening to, that Donald Trump, certainly went and visited and did interviews, and that Kamala Harris didn't. She's been criticized a little bit for perhaps making the wrong choice. But where does, in terms of the political game that's to be played in representing men, what does the Democratic Party do with that culture of podcasts, the kind of conversations they have, and also, the recognition of the kind of masculinity that they claim to be about?
Well, again, thank you for asking me. The Democratic Party had $1.5 billion, and they spent very tiny amount of money. The Republicans outspent the Democrats in outreach to young men by something like 10-1. We need to go into the Democrats, progressives, liberals need to go into these spaces. They need to go on these shows. They need to create their own shows. They need to create a whole media sort of infrastructure.
None of that will work. You think it's a problem that money can solve, right? It doesn't really cost any money to aspire to manhood. Masculine aspiration it's free. It's literally baked into your bones. It is swimming around in your testicles right now. All of your masculine aspiration is just stewing in your testicles right now, waiting to be released onto the world for better or worse, right? And that requires $0. It takes money to repel that, to repress that. It takes money to convince a nation of men that their women know better. And that's kind of where the Democrats have been putting all their money. And so the problem isn't a problem of money. It's because you really don't want to understand, and you low-key resent what it means to be a man. The entire Democrat view of the world is that men bad, men need to pay for how bad they've treated women.
A lot of people are talking about this, because young men are not reading, forgive me, Thomas, think pieces in the Atlantic. I read them, and John reads them, and maybe a lot of people in the audience read them, but young men are not reading think pieces, and they're not going to seminars. They're listening to Theo Vaughn interviewing Donald Trump, or they're listening to Joe Rogan interview an astrophysicist one day, and some political figure on the next day, and they're watching social media. And by the way, the Trump campaign knows this. And what they did, for example, Donald Trump would go to UFC fights, and he would show up at the fight knowing, by the way, it's a great photo op. You have thousands of cheering men, mostly men, and disproportionately Black and Latino in those spaces. And Donald Trump would walk in, everybody would be cheering. Sometimes a fighter literally in the ring would, in the square would say, Donald Trump is in the house, and everybody would cheer. And that would go on social media and get millions and millions of views, which then reinforced the idea that he's the man's candidate. We love him. He loves us. And then those people, the Democrats, don't even have the time, give us the time of day. So I would say, John, we need to go into those spaces and create our own spaces and talk to those men
Even if you gave me the time of day, what would you offer me? What would you offer me? A conversation with your transgender expert? A date with a feminist? Well, I mean, what would you offer me if you gave me the time of day?
On their terms.
But Bernie Sanders went on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan endorsed him. I mean, Democrats have already been in those spaces and, can reach with a universal message. They don't have to pander. Bernie Sanders was Joe Rogan's candidate before he flipped to Trump.
I'm sorry, that was a one-off. Joe Rogan platforms right-wing voices and anti-feminist voices almost every day. He has once occasionally he'll have a Bernie Sanders on, or he'll have a Cornel West on.
And notice, right, this obsession with quote anti-feminist voices, you are telling me what you value. You value feminism as a moral imperative. Therefore, it is a moral imperative to reduce the influence and power of men. How am I not supposed to be bothered by that?
He'll agree with them, and then he'll have a series of right-wing voices the next several days and agree with them as well. So I think it's overstated that he was like somehow a progressive who was like a really a Bernie supporter. I'll say this for your air. Joe Rogan has never had, as far as I know, a man on who's arguing a pro-feminist or a gender equality position, not once, ever, in all the thousands of shows that he's done. In other words,
he had that what's that guy who ruins everything? That was literally the name of his show. It was like David Ruins Everything. Some chubby fat twink with glasses ruins everything. He was on the show. They don't survive in these environments, bro. They cannot make it.
His audience, which is disproportionately men and young men, have never even heard men articulate that you can be a strong man, a powerful man, and support gender justice and racial justice and feminism. They've never even heard this on the Joe Rogan show.
You can't sell that anywhere. That's kind of the Democrats just refuse to learn. And this is the problem, because and it's almost becoming an identitarian problem for Democrats. Like, this is literally what it means to be a Democrat. You have to believe that men can magically become women. You have to believe that a 40-year-old man dating a 20-year-old woman is somehow too old, but a child knows whether or not he can be a boy or a girl. Like, you have to believe these aggressively competing ideas, right? These ideas not only oppose, they hate each other. You have to believe them both at the same time, right? You have to believe that the white man has all the privilege in America, while you check all the boxes that say I'm black and I'm a minority and I deserve extra credits and I deserve extra special treatment and all that. This is what it means to be a Democrat. You have to believe conflicting ideas. You have to just believe in fairy tales.
So I think Joe Rogan is reachable on some level. I think he seems like a reasonable guy, but he hasn't given anything like the platform like you're doing, John, and you know, in this program, to this kind of conversation.
Thomas, you want to respond to that?
Sure. Well, I would just say when the candidate was talking about issues that didn't specify identities, as Sanders was, Joe Rogan invited him on, and if he in fact is hostile to identity politics overtures, I don't see how doubling down on those is going to get you to reach his audience on his platform.
The question we're taking on here is, could identity politics help Democrats engage men? I'm John Donvan, and our debaters are Jackson Katz and Thomas Chatterton Williams. We've been talking about
how do Democrats even craft a white male identity politics? Like, I swear to God, it'll be just a bunch of twinks and hats, bro. That's all it'll be. Anyway, True Hype with the $2 super chat says, in the words of Liam Neeson's Taken, good luck. Yeah. Good luck trying to craft a Democrat identity politics for white men.
This for quite a while now, got to some interesting places, but we always get to more interesting places when we bring in other voices to the conversation. So I want to first welcome Cecilia D'Anastasio. Cecilia is an award-winning journalist with Bloomberg News, where she reports on the video game industry and digital culture. Cecilia, welcome to Open to Debate, and please come in with your question.
Thank you for having me. Great conversation so far. I want to start with the video game question. So over the last decade, we've seen gaming companies producing games that don't center the type of people, the demographic that games have been marketed to for a long time, upper middle class men. And there's been some serious backlash to that from that demographic of gamers, accusing video game companies of eroding or even taking away their culture. This is a question for Jackson. We've seen the same dynamics in politics recently around the DEI backlash. How could the Democratic Party convince?
Real quick, you know, even with the Gamergate thing, right? Once you start bringing Gamergate back up, how long ago was Gamergate, by the way? You realize there is a right-wing theory that if you'd have just let us play video games, we probably wouldn't even have noticed you gay twerking in front of children. We would have been so focused on Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption and Solar Blade and whatever it is the kids are playing now, we might not have even noticed you trans twerking in front of the children. But then Gamergate happened, and you pissed off a lot of the white autistic nerds, and they started to notice things, and now Trump is your president all over again. You should have just let them play their video games. But no, you know what you did? You made all the video girls ugly. And now Trump's your president. It's all connected.
Young men that centering other perspectives is additive and not destructive?
That's a great question, and I know
That's a
that
really great question.
I know that I can't do it full
Yeah.
justice, but I would say one of the ways that I would reframe the narrative about that set of issues is that it takes more strength on the part of men and young men to lift up others than it is to dominate others. In other words, being inclusive is actually a quality that you should aspire to. It's not softness, it's not weakness, it's actually strength. And men who are confident would not be threatened by, for example, women's aspirations. White people who are confident aren't going to.
Emotional shaming. You're not offering me anything. You're just telling me there's something wrong with me. Keep it up, bro. Keep it up. This is like I was trying to point out to Freezy before. Like, listen, you can't bully your brothers into loving your sisters, bro. Because, we're having a whole black love conversation. Like, stop yelling at niggas because you feel some type of way about how they talk about women. Like, that's not going to make them like the girls anymore. You yelling at men isn't going to make them forget about all the shit women have done. And like all you got is emotional shaming. You can't offer me anything.
Be threatened by people of color who are aspiring to be treated as full citizens. Heterosexual people who are confident and self-secure people aren't threatened by others' aspirations to be treated as whole human beings. So I would frame it as not a sign of weakness and softness, if you will, on the part of men to incorporate these, new groups of people who want to come into those spaces, but it's a sign of strength. And some people might say, well, why do you have to use that kind of terminology? I think because I'm very practical. I think we need to use that kind of terminology because it's positive and aspirational. And by the way,
it takes a lot of strength to be a bottom, I suppose. Like, they literally want to redefine strength. And then all the right wing is going to do they're just going to point at you and laugh. And it's like, yeah, he's gay strong. That's going to be the Democrats' slogan in 2028, right? We're not just strong, we're gay strong.
Wait, we're deep into this conversation, and we had not even the word has not even been mentioned. Toxic masculinity. I never even used the term toxic masculinity in my work, in my writing. I think it's a problematic term because even though I know what it means, and a lot of other people know what it means, I think if the goal is to have an open and honest conversation with men and young men, it pushes the wrong buttons. Also, can I also say that Gamergate in 2014 was that an incredible moment where men in the gaming industry, not the industry itself, but the gamers were fighting back against feminist aspirations to, critique the incredible misogyny of the gaming industry. And Steve Bannon figured out, this is one of his early.
So my games are misogynistic now. I'm a misogyny because I like video games. They cannot help themselves. This problem is only going to grow. Ian with the $5 super chat, he says, exactly. We went to nerd shit to get away from their gay shit. Then they started putting gay shit into our nerd shit. Bruh,
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with y'all? You niggas are crazy.
Listen, all I wanted to do was be a cowboy in the late 1800s, ride my horse, shoot at bad guys, collect a couple of legendary pelts every now and then. Life was good. It was a simpler time back then. Sleeping by the campfire, hitching rides on random train cars, getting into fights with grizzly bears. It was a simpler time. I don't do any of that anymore. All I do is call Democrats gay every night, 7 nights a week. That's all I do now. You took that from me. It's all your fault.
Insights to weaponize, he could weaponize the anger that he saw and the resentment among young men in Gamergate for political ends towards right-wing populist ends and Trump's ascension. So it's clearly an important, you bring an important point into the conversation, that the gaming culture, if you will, is a male-dominated space, that there's been a real sort of hunkering down on the part of some men at diversifying that space, just like there is in some workplaces.
Thomas, you want to respond to either the question or to Jackson's response to the question?
Well, I don't have strong views on video gaming or that specifically, but I do think that, you know, some of the frustration around, we can say, DEI or what's happened in movies, in Hollywood and entertainment, and I guess video games as well, is what feels like an inauthentic need to just take anything and make the character into XYZ category, whether it's a remake of a film or whether it's a Marvel comic superhero. There's.
I will say this Thomas Chatterton Williams dude, whoever he is, he at least is attempting to genuinely understand the other side, and he may be still a long way from understanding, but he gets that, you know, you guys do look kind of fake and gay, and maybe you should cut it out.
There's something that feels false, and I think the superlative of that movement in the culture is like Google Gemini. When you ask them to draw a picture of the founding fathers, it's like just African American men and disabled women. You know, this is like the extreme of the tendency to just diversify the culture for its own sake. I think inclusiveness and the principle of and the value of a thriving multi-ethnic culture that excludes no one can be pursued without the kind of contrivance of identity fetishes.
And you know, speaking of identity fetishes, it's a great phrase. It's one thing for America to strive for multi-ethnic harmony when the country is like 80% Black and the rest is, I mean, I'm sorry, when the country was 80% white, and even that is only going back to like the 70s or 80s. But if you want to talk a peaceful, harmonious multiculturalism, when it's mostly one ethnicity, that's relatively easy to do. When it's like 5 or 6 ethnicities with all relatively similar political power, then it's just nonstop chaos. It's total tribalism all the way down until it breaks out into bloody civil war.
For its own appeal.
Cecilia, I want to thank you very much for your question. I just also want to point out to our audience that I mentioned Cecilia is an award-winning journalist. Her award-winning work actually has focused on the awards are for work she did focusing on misogyny in the gaming culture and in Silicon Valley, and I recommend that to you. Cecilia, thanks so much for joining us. Next up, we have a question from Amanda Clayton. Amanda is assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at UC Berkeley. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us on the program, and please come on in with your question.
Great. Thank you for having me, and thank you for this conversation.
Right away, Amanda, you look like you wasted your best years learning stupidity at university.
Want to agree with some of the speakers, and I think that the Republican Party is activating white male grievance and a certain type of masculinity. So wishing that we could go back to 2008 seems like a non-starter, as does thinking that Democrats can appeal to conservative men with these sorts of progressive overtures trying to explain to them that feminism isn't zero-sum. I just don't think that's going to work. So given that we're in this place where identity politics is being activated by the right, I think the question really is, how should Democrats respond? And personally, I think it's about embracing the working class roots of the Democratic Party. That is an authentic way that the party can respond. And I think that's...
Those roots are male. The working class roots of the Democrat Party are white men. It wasn't even until the 60s that black men or black people began to move into the Democrat Party. So up until that time, it was white men. But that makes you uncomfortable, doesn't it?
What Joe Biden did so well in 2020. That's what Bernie Sanders has been able to do so well. And so this leads me to my question, though, is I don't know whether or not this messaging can really be done by people on the left that don't themselves come from these roots and aren't themselves white men. So where does that leave the Democratic Party?
I literally call that out at the start of this clip. I pointed out how you got Mr. Katz here and then Thomas Chatterton biracialness. You probably have a psychological gap that you can't bridge because you don't have the right people in place, you know?
If they also want to, at the same time, embrace diversity in their leadership.
Amanda, who would you like to take that question first?
I would first, let's say to Jackson.
Okay, thanks, Jackson, if you could take that.
Sure. Well, again,
how does a party that has spent the last 40, 50 years appealing to women, gays, and minorities make a hard turn to appeal to white men while still maintaining their appeal to women and minorities and gays? Like it is literally the clip I keep playing for you guys. This is the Democrats right now.
You teach me all my life that the white man is the devil? Come on, you teach me my whole life that the white man is the devil. Now you tell me it's all right for him to come among us.
This is literally a Democrat meeting.
It's a great question and framing. I mean, and I'm in support of what you're saying. I mean, there's the great book Rust Belt Union, Rust Belt Union Blues, which talks about the decline of the union movement in Western Pennsylvania and how what used to be connecting working class, including white working class men, was not just the actual workplace, but all the other, the union halls and the bowling leagues and all the ways in which the men were connecting through unions, and then a class consciousness was being formed. And of course, those unions were supporting mostly the Democrats, because the Democrats are more pro-union, obviously, than the Republicans. But because with the decline of unionism, now these men are connecting through gun clubs. This is with the argument of Rust Belt Union Blues and gun clubs, which are tend to be more right wing. And Fox.
Hey, what did Obama say about your guns and your Bible? And I was an Obama guy back then because, I was young and black, but I even thought that was kind of a cheap shot.
Fox News is playing in the gun club, but it's meeting a need of these people for connection. So I think the decline of unions, and especially manufacturing unions and sort of blue collar trade unions, which were dominated by white men, to the exclusion of women and people of color. And I understand that that's one of the tensions in the union movement over the years. But the decline of unionism was one of the reasons why there's been a sort of a shift to the right among the white working class, because they didn't have a way to connect with each other, and they didn't have the inputs, the progressive inputs, and the class consciousness that are shaped by those kind of associations. But I would say, yes, we need to have a very much a class focus. And I think obviously the Democratic Party needs to be much better at articulating a progressive working class politics. But I do think there are gender aspects of that have to be acknowledged, just like Thomas and I were talking about earlier.
Thomas, if you can take on the same question, I'm also curious whether you think an appeal to the working class would itself be a form of identity politics or not.
Well, I mean, we can say that, there are many facets of identity that one can, emphasize or de-emphasize. And I think that actually broad-based class coalitions, which cut across, immutable characteristics, is a healthier kind of identity politics, as it were, to pursue if you have to. Obviously, you have to, politics is coalitional. So I think something rooted in class can be quite effective. I think Bernie Sanders demonstrated twice the appeal of that. And, I think that Donald Trump has even to an extent demonstrated the appeal of that this time. I don't fully concede the point that we cannot return to a kind of optimistic, transcendent politics of unity that can even be led by a non-white candidate such as.
But your entire reason for unity was we need to unite against white people. This is literally in the background of all the Democrats' effort over the last 40 years. And now you're coming to a point where, what are you going to say? I'm sorry, white people. My bad. I didn't mean to turn all the browns and the nons against you. Oops.
We saw in 2008, I think the country, and in fact the globe, I live half the year in France, and it cannot be overstated. The entire world was captivated by the ascendance of Barack Obama. It gave us a glimpse into something that we wanted to see in our own politics, and it gave Europeans a glimpse of what they wanted to see. It was really a moment when people wanted to achieve the multi-ethnic societies that we all are already living in. So I think we can recapture that. I think it has to be done authentically, and it can't be pandering.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for your question. Great question. Got us to a really interesting place. Now we're going to hear a question from Mike Nellis. Mike Nellis is former senior advisor to Kamala Harris and founder of Authentic, which is a digital fundraising and advertising agency for Democratic candidates and social impact.
You know what, Mike, who used to work for Kamala? I don't think I'm interested. I think we're going to kind of wind this talk down tonight. Ian with the $5 super chat, he says the Dems moved from unions, the common man, majority of the population, to rich college educated elites. I know what that quotation mark really means. Minority of the pop who talk down to men. Yeah. The Democrats have really they've gone just so far off the baseline that I don't really know how to chart a course back for them. Because anything they would do to appeal to men, just men, not even white men, just men broadly speaking, it's kind of a non-starter. Because are you going to appeal to straight men? So for the Democrats to make an appeal to straight men, what are you going to say? Is it okay that I like big breasts? I like big butts and I cannot lie. Am I allowed to say that as a Democrat? No, you can't say that because not every girl has a big butt. And you're being offensive. You're not being inclusive to the skinny butt, medium build women. I can literally see that type of conversation being had in some weird place in Democrat circles, right? They've just kind of broken with so much of basic reality. It's really funny to even consider how you even try to get back to that. Are you gonna now apologize to white people for basically being the motivation for all of your anti-racism programs? Are white people going to stop being the enemy? Are they going to stop being the racial boogeyman? Are we going to cancel Black History Month? How do you even walk it back? Really, it's a crazy conversation to have. How do you begin to walk it back now? I guess an apology is the typical common starting place, right?
We're the whites. Nobody ever cares if bad things happen to us anymore.
When South Park is low-key pointing out this kind of reality, it's the thing, bro. South Park rarely creates things out of thin air. They always mock observable reality. And so now you have more or less let's say 40% of the population who is at least considering whether or not one of the two major political parties actually hates me and maybe wants me to die by the hands of brown foreigners. That's a lot to consider. That is definitely a lot to consider. The Democrats don't want people thinking like that.
And I said it from the start, this is advanced darkness. This is heart of darkness. This is the jungle drum. This is the fertility goddess of chaos. They're literally going to eat your balls. They're going to cut your fucking nuts off and eat them.
Whoa, what? They're gonna what? Hit that like button, guys. Thanks for watching. Thank you to all the supporters. Appreciate you coming out every night to support the mission. We will be back tomorrow with another episode. You have a great night. Take care, everybody.
Aspiring to be patriarchs like what white men have, that isn't freedom. That isn't going to help anybody. It's certainly not going to help black people.
It's done. It's done. It's done. It's done.